we'll just work through it. Good morning. This is Tailinh Agoyo, and this is Rise and Thrive, Indigenous Arts, Culture, and Joyful Acts of Resistance. And today I am here with Karelle A. And I'm very excited. Hi, Karelle. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Usula Media. Karelle, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Karelle, and we'll get into our conversation. Karelle A is a PhD candidate in anthropology at Rutgers University. She received her bachelor's degree from Dartmouth College in anthropology with a minor in Native American studies. Her dissertation research explores embodied and distributed Indigenous sovereignty in public and performative spaces. She has taught classes in both cultural and linguistic anthropology at Rutgers University. As a member of the Nanticoke Indian Tribe, she represents her nation as a speaker and dancer. She is actively working on Nanticoke language revitalization with the Nanticoke Tribe, including organizing and creating lesson plans for community classes. Using her experience and connections in the legal field, she assisted the Nanticoke Tribe with ratifying their recognition in the state of Delaware. She continues to work as an activist and representative for her community, promoting visibility, decolonization, and education. I am so happy to have you here today and finally be able to sit down and chat.
Me too. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. Well, how about we start, if you'd like to give yourself a short intro, and then we can start talking your academic work. I would love to start there.
Sure. So I'm currently working on my PhD at Rutgers. I am in the field of anthropology, and it's I often get people who, kind of give me a sort of a sideways look when I say I'm doing anthropology, right? Because anthropology has such a long and complicated history with Native America. I personally do think there's a lot of value in anthropology as this sort of study of the human experience and human connections with each other. And there's a lot of really great works that are coming out of the field. So I'm happy to be a part of that. I am right now, I just finished all my coursework, and I am ready to sort of dive into my full-time research right now, and then my dissertation writing. So really excited to get started with that.
So you had to finish school online. Is that what happened? How was that transition for you?
Yeah, I almost made it to the end, but so it was basically the time period from our spring break going forward that we had to transition to online. So I was both at that time taking classes as a student and also teaching undergraduate classes. And so we had to move everything online in the span of like a week, I think.
Right.
Maybe a little bit less. So that was, it was a big transition. We all had to figure out how to use Zoom.
Right.
And I remember my first sessions, I had the free Zoom account that only lets you have like 40 minutes of time. And so I'd be like, all right, guys, we're running through the program. We have to race through this. Or if we needed to come back, we're like, okay, everyone log out, and then I'll send you a new link and we'll log back in.
Yeah, I imagine it was a harder transition probably as a teacher than as a student, because you had to do so much organizing.
Yes. As my grad student seminar, it's a small group of people. And so we were able to sort of more easily just coordinate our ability to kind of have a group chat online versus me trying to deal with like 3 separate undergraduate classes. They've all been sent home. They're trying to figure out if they have internet access, if they have access to devices.
The basics.
Trying to do a group discussion on Zoom is definitely a new experience.
Yes, for sure. So let's talk about your dissertation and your research. This is very interesting. How did you come to decide to do your dissertation on this subject?
Yeah, so it's been it's been evolving for several years. So before I even started grad school, I was living in DC, and I was working at a law firm, and really kind of just sort of chatting with different community members about language revitalization work. Um, and so, I started working a little bit more actively with my tribal community on language revitalization. And I spent time at our museum with our museum curator and organizer. He's in charge of sort of all of our archives. And
Mm-hmm.
so, we were kind of pouring through earlier language revitalization projects, and just kind of, trying to plan for the future and figure out, what direction we can go with our own revitalization project.
Can you talk a little bit about your tribe, where you're located,
Oh, sure.
and yeah, give a bit of a background for people who don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Nanticoke Tribe is, a smaller tribe for sure. We are mainly located in southern Delaware, mostly in the town of Millsboro, which is, for most people who are familiar with Delaware beaches, it's pretty close to Rehoboth Beach, for those of you who are familiar with that area. Um, so our community is um, one, it's one of a sort of group of interconnected communities that we're connected by kinship. It's one extended family, separate political organization. And so I also have family in the Nanticoke Lenape tribe and they're located in southern New Jersey in the sort of Bridgeton area, as
Mm-hmm.
well as some other members in the Lenape tribe of Delaware, who are in Cheswold, which is sort of right outside Dover in central Delaware. And so, our communities are part of the sort of greater Lenni Lenape family kinship community, language community. And so we are, like really working to try to, keep our traditions alive and, maintaining kinship with other Native communities in the East.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so back to your dissertation.
Yes. Oh, yes. So after sort of doing some of this language revitalization work and also kind of seeing some of the political moves that our communities were engaging with, because I also worked, since I was working in law, I helped our tribal community ratify their recognition with the state of Delaware. So it had sort of been understood, but we had, realized with our new tribal council and tribal chief that came in as they were sort of reviewing the documentation, they realized that it was sort of this understanding that didn't actually have the the actual like legal documentation behind it. And so we were able to just get that solidified and ratified with the state of Delaware.
And when was that?
2011, I think.
And how complicated was that process?
Um,
Did you receive any pushback?
Well, actually, with the state of Delaware, not so much, because like I said, there was already sort of this understanding and this relationship that the Nanticoke Tribe has developed and continues to develop with the state of Delaware. And so it was more of a formality, but also it gives us that extra, security as we are sort of engaging in these political projects, to say that, we have legibility with the state of Delaware in their own terms, as well as in our, our own understandings of sovereignty. So, so it was a lot of different steps. So I was involved in part of them, and just sort of, really helping to sort of make the connections, and, help our community figure out, what the steps were to get everything completed. But yeah, so there are other, I think like it's an ongoing process as far as, just continuing to maintain and continue to develop our relationship with the state of Delaware. But so doing all of this made me, consider going back to school and getting a PhD and really being able and wanting to sort of write about and teach about the ways in which sovereignty is functioning and working and developing in Native America. So I already was immersed, I guess, in the field of anthropology from my undergraduate time. So I developed my project thinking about, how can we understand more about sovereignty by looking at the practices that, my community and some of our neighboring communities are doing. And so when I'm often reading about sovereignty in academic works, there's a sort of a history of it being connected very specifically to these, Western forms of nation state and citizenship. And I'm really looking to, expand that out to talk about how, sovereignty also works through people, through their communication, through their embodied actions. And so I wanted to do it in some of these spaces that aren't necessarily considered, I guess at first glance, they're not considered political spaces. So thinking about these public and performative places like powwows. And so, powwows are these places where there's so many different things that are going on. There's, these opportunities to connect with family and to sing and to dance together and to share good medicine and, pass traditions down. But it's also this space where we are engaging in both sort of sovereignty and political work and education and, teaching non-Native people about who we are. But also sort of asserting our own representations of ourselves, our own identity work. And so I'm really interested in how we can sort of incorporate these questions of sovereignty, not just in like active, sort of political movements, engagement specifically with the state, but also the ways in which we're sort of doing it in our daily lives.
Yes.
We as Native people, where our bodies are already political as we move through the space, as we move through any state. And so, I really wanted to sort of write about that and how it manifests, both in these sort of public and performative spaces, and also through language revitalization work. Particularly here in the East Coast, Native people have, a pretty high degree of invisibility to sort of our non-Native neighbors. And so there's a lot of sort of identity work that's going on, and also in language revitalization work, as I've seen different communities that are sort of collaborating with each other. There are so many different communities that are all part of the same language family, this Algonquin language family that has sort of different regional variations and dialects. And so, as different communities are collaborating their efforts or coordinating with each other or, getting ideas from each other as far as how to conduct their own revitalization work, they're also sort of reforging these, these kinship ties as all of us as Lenape people. So I'm also interested in, writing about that.
I really love the idea that that you're going out into spaces and talking to people. Can you give us some examples of who you're talking to, how you decide who you're reaching out to, and then how do you collect all of that data and put it into how do you collect it and organize it and process it? Because it's really, it's not, it's something, but it's not necessarily, like you're saying, it's not necessarily in the traditional academic way to go out and collect all these things. This is not how you're approaching this. You're approaching your studies in a completely different way, which is so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's certainly a work in progress to figure out how I'm going to, sort of record the information. So my plan is to do it multimodally. So I am I've started by talking to my own Nanticoke community members who have sort of heard me talk about my project for years before as I was slowly starting to develop it.
Yeah.
And so, I've gone to them first and have, asked them if they'd like to be a part of this.
Okay.
And I try to, explain my project as well as I can. And it is sort of constantly evolving. And
Mm-hmm.
as I, continue my active research, it may continue to evolve as I learn new things as I'm actively out there. But so I have the past few summers, as I've gone to powwows, I've started to, talk to people about, how I'm really interested in this, and also, why I want to, continue to raise awareness for, what we are doing and who we are as Native people. And I think that it's important to to do that in many different sort of spaces. And so, I really want to continue to bring this discussion to academia. So I have I sat down to do a couple of formal interviews with people. So which is where I just are having conversations with them um, about the revitalization work that they may be doing, or just about for those of us who go and do presentations in places like schools and churches and other community centers. I talk to them about sort of their experiences there and what they are, um, what they're learning, what they want the people they're interacting with to understand, their general feelings about it. Um, and then also I do what I call participant observation. So it's both sort of participating and observing how people are, moving through and just interacting in these spaces.
Hmm.
So, if I'm at a powwow, I'm a dancer, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
there dancing, but also, talking to people in the moments um, um, as they're interacting with the guests who are coming to watch, or as they're sort of interacting with each other, or incorporating different elements of our language revitalization project into these spaces.
Uh-huh.
And then also using media to sort of record, so video and photography to sort of bring in the visual elements of this.
That's fantastic. I'm so excited to hear more about it as you continue on and as it continues to evolve, and then also to see when you finally have it all done.
Great.
We are going to take a break. This is Tailinh on Rise and Thrive on Usula Media with Karelle Hall. And when we come back, we'll talk more about all these great things.
If you love them enough to suck the snot out of their nose at 4 a.m., then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
Sometimes the things we do or say can make others feel hurt, excluded, or isolated. Everything you say and do creates an impact.
How am I supposed to save the whole world?
You can't think about saving the world. You have to think about saving one person.
Because of you, someone's entire life can change. You don't have to be a superhero to have a positive impact.
Friends?
Friends.
Hi, this is Tailinh, and we're back. I'm here with Karelle A, who is sharing with us about her studies at Rutgers University. And we were just talking about your dissertation that you're planning to start research on in the coming year. And basically about how you were collecting data. So have you you've started talking to people and you've done a few interviews, but what does the process look like for this coming year is it a full-time thing? Are you traveling all the time? Where do you get the budget to be able to do this work?
Yeah, so I have, so the past 2 summers, while I was in between of my academic classes, I started to do a little bit of that preliminary research, which was mostly just sort of getting people to sort of understand what my project was and to see if, to get what we call interlocutors, people who want to participate in my project, who will allow me to interview them and to sort of follow them around with a video camera. But now that I'm done with coursework, I will be in full-time research mode. Although, because of COVID, every powwow this summer being canceled, I'm trying to actually sort of push back that portion of my research. And so, I'm sort of continuing to kind of work through that to see, how I'm going to need to adjust my plan based on, how COVID continues to impact our lives. But there's still things that I can get started with. And, some of these spaces have moved online.
Right.
So, Facebook, there's a huge sort of social, it's the social distance powwow going on. And, many of the people that I was interviewing with and following in person are also, actively engaging with that site. And so we can kind of think about that there, sovereignty work doesn't just have to, happen in person. It's continuing as we have, moved everything online. So there's still, there's still something for me to research. I'm just now kind of, figuring out, how do I tweak that? How do I, how do I go about this? And I can also do a lot more of the language revitalization work online that I'm working on still. And, so I can look through, I'm collecting archive data, through the Library of Congress and through, other museums as I've been able to contact them. And for right now, those with online collections, which many of them have converted a lot of their documents online. Because I'm also interested in, tracing, some of these interaction histories. And you can see them in some of the older documents, like treaty documents and trade documents. So I can start doing a lot of that work now while I'm, in quarantine. And also continuing to work on, active language revitalization. Communities are moving classes online. They're creating videos. They're creating, sort of group chat experiences.
Yeah. Right. So there are a lot of resources available and becoming available now because everybody's making that shift. So that helps a lot.
Exactly.
So are you focusing on the East Coast, or are you venturing out? What's your plan there?
My plan is to focus on the East Coast and sort of really focus on, all my Lenape relations, but also like the people that Lenape people are engaging with in the East Coast as well, which includes people from the Haudenosaunee nations and other, Wolastoqey further south. But yeah, I really am interested in this sovereignty work here in the East, because I feel like there is sort of different work that's being done, just because of, the sort of variations in history, and as far as our colonization, and our sort of current and ongoing relationship with our non-native neighbors, as well as the state and federal governments. Those are all like slightly different relationships than many of the tribes in the West have. So, I'm really interested in looking at how, these communities out here are really navigating these spaces.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. That work is so necessary, and it's like long overdue. It feels like there's been so much focus on tribal people to the West, and yeah, it's wonderful. I'm so excited about your work. And so, how has we've talked about how quarantine and COVID has impacted your work, but now a lot of things have changed in the past week with the what's happening in the world with the demonstrations and revolutions happening. The Black Lives Matter movement. Do you think that there's an interconnection with your current work and your life with what's going on in the world with the Black Lives Matter movement?
Absolutely. And the history of Black people and of Native people in this country is completely intertwined. And for me personally, it's very intertwined in my life as well, because I identify both as a Black woman and as a Native American woman. But oftentimes this particular position and identity can often be an uncomfortable one. So I do think it is.
What do you mean by that?
So yes, no, there. No, it's good. There is anti-Blackness that exists in Native America, as we know, and there is also. And also in Black America, there is the perpetuation of these sort of like Native stereotypes as well. And we can, and I think it's important to look at sort of the history of how those developed, and as part of this colonial project. But I also think that we, in our sort of decolonial and sovereignty work, a lot of that work is really having this control over our own futures and our own trajectories. And I think that important work to do in these is, as part of this decolonial work, is to confront the anti-Blackness and the anti-nativeness that exists within our communities, and to because we are allies, we need to be allies in this cause, and for some parts we definitely are. There are so I've been reading a lot of really great posts and articles by people who are coming together and standing with each other. So Native people who are joining the Black Lives Matter protests and movements, as well as people who were, part of the Black Lives Matter cause, who came to Standing Rock and supported that. And we need more of that. And so we need more of it in our, public demonstrations, but also in our daily lives, like, making sure that we are, as Native people, acknowledging our Black kin. Like both like the Black community as sort of a kin community, but also the Black people who exist within Native America.
Right.
So who have that sort of, multicultural history and multiracial history. And so I think it is, important for us all to, find a way together through this. And because like these movements, the Black Lives Matter movement and these different Native Lives Matter movements are not in opposition with each other. They're not at cross purposes. So as a Native person, it is definitely important and beneficial to support the Black Lives Matter movement. If we think about, police brutality, it's going on, against Native people as well as against Black people. And so supporting this movement and supporting, each other in this is going to help all of us.
Yeah, I agree. I think there were a few articles. I mean, the incidence of violence, police brutality, murder against Native people is so high. And we are facing the same challenges. And so I agree that together in solidarity, we're stronger. And what has been your experience as a Native woman and a Black woman growing up in and having, you know, I have the same experience. I'm a Chinese woman, I'm a Native woman, you know, and there always is this kind of conflict. And I know things have changed over the years. I feel like there has been more awareness. I know when I was younger, and I'm a lot older than you, but when I was younger, there was a lot of racism that I dealt with growing up, going into all of my communities. And now I feel like people are becoming more understanding might not be the right word, but it just feels different. It doesn't feel as extreme as it used to feel. But I'm interested in your experience.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So I actually grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. You know, home of the Cleveland Indians and Chief
Right.
right? And there has been a in American Indian movement that, you know, continues to fight against that mascot. And so I remember as a kid sort of, you know, watching this unfold. And, you know, Ohio is also just an interesting place. I think it has the highest number of Native school mascots in the country, I think, or pretty close to. And also it is, and also has a very high rate of Native invisibility as well. And so, so growing up in the suburbs of Cleveland, I mostly had people, like most people never saw me as a Native woman or as a girl or as Native American. And so, you know, I look Black, Black maybe mixed with something, but they just assumed, you know, Black mixed with white maybe, because that's sort of the most common, you know, racial mix that they were, you know, familiar with.
Right.
And so, for me, it was, and mostly my opportunities to interact with other Native people outside of my immediate family was when we would visit our my mom's family in Delaware. So my mom's from Delaware, Nanticoke, of course. And so so it was really only in that moment growing up that I was actually able to sort of, you know, interact with my Native family. You know, my parents were very adamant about making sure that we learned the history. And, you know, we weren't going to be taught it in school. So they made sure that we learned it. So made sure they taught us it on our own so that we knew, you know, like who we are and, you know, where we come from. And then also sort of the tense relationship with the United States. But the first time I was really able to interact with other Native people from different communities that weren't my family was when I went to college.
Okay.
So I went to Dartmouth, and Dartmouth actually has a pretty active and considering it's an East Coast, you know, school, a large Native population,
right?
Because they do this active work of recruiting Native students,
right?
And there's a Native American program that's developed, as well as you know, social organizations,
right?
So, you know, it was my first real opportunity to interact with, you know, Native students from
everywhere.
Everywhere. And
I went to Dartmouth too. I don't know if you knew that. So
I did. That's so exciting. Okay.
Yeah. I'm a 92.
Oh, wonderful. 2008.
Yes. So I okay. So I know that, you know, that was a saving grace. Just having the NAD program and the Native American program there was really helpful, because there you are in the middle of nowhere, way up north, and it's a very male-dominated white school, so it can get very tricky to be a brown woman there.
Yes, but it was so nice to be able to, build community. And then also, because I built community with my fellow Native students and also with my fellow Black students. And just being able to have those communities, and yeah, to really sort of understand something. You have people coming from all different perspectives, all
Right.
different communities, all different places, learning, different languages that people are speaking. It really, really inspired me to try to want to do, some sort of political project in the future.
So that's great that you found it helpful. You found community there. And I think what you're saying is interesting, that there are people from all different regions, all different Native communities, but not just that, but people who are from the cities or who grew up in the suburbs, or just all different Native experiences. And that's something that I found really fabulous also.
Yeah, and we're all sort of able to, to learn from each other, and to
Right.
really, and also to really kind of rethink our own ideas of what it is to be Native,
Mm-hmm.
Native American.
Absolutely. Right.
Because,
Right.
we have our own traditions, of course, but also,
Right.
we are also inundated with all the media ideas of, who Native people are and what Native people are supposed to be and supposed to do.
Right. Right.
So really having that opportunity to come together with so many different people from different backgrounds really helped us all to kind of, sort of expand our, our ideas.
Yeah, that's a constant ongoing conversation that will probably go on forever. What does it mean to be a Native person?
Yes.
We're going to take a break. This is Rise and Thrive on USLA Media. I'm here with Karelle Hall. We'll be back.
Sometimes the thing you do creates an impact.
How am I supposed to save the whole world?
You can't think about saving the world. You have to think about saving one person.
Because of you, someone's entire life can change. You don't have to be a superhero to have a positive impact.
Friends?
Friends.
$150/90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Hello, and we're back. Tailinh Agoyo and Rise and Thrive, Indigenous art, culture, and joyful acts of resistance. I'm here with Karelle Hall. We've been having a great conversation about so many things. So Karelle, I want to know when you decided to move from, so did you go from Ohio to Dartmouth and you're like, oh yeah.
Oh, right, Dartmouth.
I was at it. and then you moved to Delaware? Or are you in New Jersey now?
At this exact moment, I am in New Jersey.
Okay.
But once I graduated from Dartmouth, I went back home for the summer while I was, sort of figuring out job hunting and all of that. And then I moved to Washington, D.C.
For work, right?
And I lived there for like the last 9 years, or until I started.
Got it.
And so I was, working in law. I had this idea when I graduated that I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted to pursue a career in law or if I wanted to pursue like an academia PhD route. And also it was sort of a recession when I graduated. So I was like, okay, before I, jump into another school, let me figure out exactly what it is I want to do. Let me get experience first. Let me sort of, figure things out a little bit. And, I really did enjoy working in law. I mean, I think that my interests and sort of my questions haven't really changed as far as like what I want to do. The question was, am I going to, sort of do it through this legal route, or am I going to do it through this sort of academia PhD route? And so, I decided I'd rather write about it than argue it, I guess, in a court. But living in DC also allowed me to be a lot closer geographically to my family in Delaware, to my community, to sort of our extended Nanticoke and Lenape community. And so I had sort of the opportunity and ability to be a lot more involved, socially and politically as well.
Right. So do you foresee staying on this side?
Yeah, I'm definitely planning to stay out here, I think. I mean, like when I graduate, what sorts of job opportunities.
Sure, right.
So I might be a little flexible, but I do I like the Mid-Atlantic area. I feel like I've visited, out west in California and all of that. But I feel like, I like the East Coast. I like being, near family. So probably stay out here.
And you're a dancer. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. So I actually, like I said, I grew up in Ohio, kind of geographically separate from my community. Right. We went back to visit every year or so, but it was mostly like summer vacations, summer visits,
Right.
And so, I went to our tribal powwow and was able to, be there with community and to watch the dancers. Everybody in my immediate family danced. And so I wanted to dance, but I wasn't really sure how to get into it. But Dartmouth actually was where I started dancing. So I was an adult, I guess, when I started to actually dance, because they had a Native women's dance group at Dartmouth. And so I joined it and was like, hey, I want to dance. And they're like,
that's great.
And so they taught me fancy shawl. And then once I graduated and I moved down to DC, I was, I had already sort of been introduced to dancing, and I was like, all right, I can dance at my own powwow, which was like a really, really important experience for me. And so, I contacted one of my cousins who, is a great seamstress, and I was like, hey, can you make me a, like a fancy shawl dress? So she and I designed it together, and just that first time I was able to dance in, in the arena was really magical for me. And, my family that was there, I remember one of my uncles was crying that, because nobody in our sort of immediate extended family was actually a dancer. But then after that, I was able to bring my mom into the dance circle to start dancing. And then one of my auntie cousins and my sister.
Incredible.
And so, and now we can all dance together as a family and keep this going. So, that's been sort of a really, really important
beautiful
for me.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And it's so nice to hear that you were able to bring more family into the circle. And it really shows how all of our experiences are so different. And this is part of what I find really interesting about what you'll be researching, is that you'll be talking to people, and there will be people who were born dancing, right? And then there are people who are learning at all different stages of their lives and finding it in so many different ways, and there's no right way.
Exactly.
But
and all of it is part
I think that's really fascinating and beautiful. And that the Dartmouth community, we didn't have that. We had a singing group, the Ockham Pond Singers.
Yep. They still
are they still there?
Yeah, or they were when I was there.
Yeah. So, but a women's dance group would have been fantastic. But I love that.
Yeah, and I think now they also, they've added in men too. So now it's not just Native women.
It's great. Yeah. It's really, really great, and the powwow is really great.
I want to go back up there for it at some point.
I have not been back up there in maybe 20 years or so.
We should go. We should plan
go to the powwow together. Yeah, road trip. Yeah. So now, what do your days look like now? We only have a few minutes left, but how are you? Are you getting out to demonstrations? What is your participation in the movement, and what do you see for the future?
Yeah, so being in New Brunswick, New Jersey is after having lived right in or outside of DC for so many years. When I lived in DC, I was I was able to participate in several different marches and protests and movements. Here in New Brunswick, I do feel a little bit more isolated. There are some local like small community protests, but most people are going to either the bigger ones in New York City or Philadelphia. So my current activism hasn't been in the streets.
And COVID's been making everything very difficult, especially if you're not right in the city. Yes. To get somewhere else is just very complicated and not safe.
Exactly. But I do also believe that the movement is taking place on all sorts of different platforms, right?
Absolutely.
And so I have been, I've been actively, having conversations with people, people who are interested in sort of understanding or wanting to learn, how to be an ally. And so, since I do have this sort of role in academia, trying to use my voice as an educator to, to discuss, how we got to these movements, what preceded them, what's behind them, what we want moving forward, and how to be an ally in this.
So are you having these conversations? Because this is interesting to me, because I just watched, I think it's Amanda Seales, is that her name? I don't remember. I don't know how to pronounce her name. There was a video she posted that was like, don't ask me questions. Go do your research. This is not my burden. Yes. I've learned your history. You can learn my history. So are you having these one-on-one conversations, or are they more on a bigger platform? And do you feel, I know you're an educator, so in a way that it just is a natural progression, but at what point do you feel like, okay, now you're stepping into my space and you need to learn how to do the work on your own?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I do think that it is not the job of every Black American to educate the non-Black community about our histories and our struggles. I do take on a little bit more of that responsibility myself, just purely because I'm in academia. As we've been talking, like the focus of my research is not specifically on race, but also race is very much a part of, of sort of this ongoing sovereignty work.
Yeah.
So for me, I do, sort of in spaces want to, acknowledge that I am going to be sort of in this educator role. But also I do encourage people that they need to research some of this information. And so some of it has been, here's a book you should read. This person spent a lot of time, actually thinking and theorizing these same questions that you're asking. and they published that book. So, go do the work and read it, and then maybe we can have a conversation about it. So for right now,
that's a good approach.
For the recent past, I haven't been doing a lot of public posting, although I have done a lot of that in the past. I've sort of I've been in a place where I just didn't want to sort of send out a broad Facebook message to everyone reading. But I have had, more sort of intimate conversations with, with people, and more in-depth conversations like with individuals about, about this movement, as well as really just, sort of sharing community and space and grief with, with my family and friends.
Yeah. Do you think those conversations have been impactful and positive?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that there are people that we are never going to reach, and I just know that, right?
Right.
And I'm not going to sort of waste my energy trying to convince somebody who doesn't want to listen. But I think there are people out there who want to listen, but they don't know how, or they're kind of sort of trying to figure out this. And and I am definitely willing to sort of meet them at a place, to help them, to metaphorically, meet them in the middle, right? To to sort of, help them, to set them on a path to understanding, how to be a good ally, and, what they can do.
That's generous of you. And that's part of your activism, and it's part of your work. And it's wonderful. So next week, what does your next week look like? Because every day, I don't know what's happening. Like every day the world shifts, right? So
I was talking with my mom yesterday, which was Wednesday.
This is not a simple question.
Yeah, I'm trying to, find some structure, trying to figure out what my new normal is.
Right.
Right now I'm in sort of the process of grant writing, which is a way that I get funding to do my research.
Okay.
So writing about my project to foundations, asking for money to do it, telling them why I think that my project is valuable, why they should fund it.
Do you find that the foundations understand it? That it's so layered, and if you're coming from a Eurocentric point of view, which a lot of the foundations are, a lot of times they don't understand the nuances. What's your experience there?
I think that, partially it's going to be my job as a writer to make it legible, to make my project legible. And so that's sort of a unfolding process. And as I apply to grants and I get feedback from them, I'm sort of continuing to develop, my own writing style and how it is that I am, talking about my project. But I do think that, different organizations have definitely sort of seen the potential.
Okay, that's great.
So I've already received a little bit of funding, like last summer, for pilot research that I did. So, I do hope that I can continue to, explain my project to, to different granting agencies and get them on board to support me.
That's great. I write a lot of grants myself, so I know. And with my organization, We Are the Seeds, I feel like it's aligned in what you're saying. We do a beautiful, joyful event in Santa Fe every year, and to talk about it and try to get funding for something that's about joy and celebration is just it's a different path, and it's an interesting way to try to write to get money for that type of work.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the funders haven't received grant applications like mine before, but it's an interesting way to write it, and it's an interesting shift. I think in that is education for people.
Yes, absolutely. So it's all part of the work.
Exactly, you're right. Everything is part of the work. Existing is part of the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No pressure. Right?
Well, we're just trying to change our corner of the world, making ripples.
Making ripples.
Right.
Right. And we start in our homes every day.
Yes.
Yeah. So how are you feeling overall? Are you feeling positive? Are you feeling, you talked about grief and grieving with your family. And there's just been so much, it's been a roller coaster, and so much, there's been a collective trauma. And then there are more specific traumas that we're all dealing with as communities and as individual families. How do you feel? What's your outlook overall?
I tend to be an optimist as a person. So, I really do, I make space for my grief, but I try not to stay there. And I do try to think about, what small things can I do to make, to make this world around me a little bit better. Because sometimes when you are, when you're sort of inundated with all of this trauma, things start to feel very hopeless and overwhelming. And oftentimes, I do feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But also my own way of sort of working through that is to, think about like, what small things can I do? What small steps can I take? And the small steps seem, a lot more feasible.
Right.
Taking that next step.
Right. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Wow. It's been a lot. It's been a long 3 months and 70 years.
Oh my goodness.
It's been a lot. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that we need to take the steps that we can achieve, and then that fills us, and then with the ripple effect. It really does make a difference in the world. And just having this conversation with you today has been really wonderful to get your perspective and talk about your work, and it'll be on YouTube and like in the world for people to access all over the world. And I think that's all these things are so important because you have such a unique perspective, and so I'm really happy that we were able to have this conversation. And I'm also really happy we were able to have it because I see you all the time, and it's always just like loud or busy.
Exactly. We just sit down and actually talk.
We have never sat down and actually, well, we did over the holidays, maybe a little bit more. At the social, we talked for about 5 minutes, not 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, but thank you so much for this. I'm really glad to just be able to, to talk with you and to, talk through some of what I'm working on and my experiences.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so we have a couple of minutes left. I'm just wondering if you have any final words you want to share with everybody as we move into another week.
Yeah, I would say, just keep working towards, making this world a better place. So for those of you who are out there on the front lines protesting, keep that up, keep this movement going. For those of you who are working those essential jobs, having to go to work every day, that is important work. And, for those of you who are having those difficult conversations with family and friends, like keep putting in that work. For those of you raising children, plant those seeds. I'm really happy to be able to do the research that I'm doing. And, I'm really excited to see and to engage with other people who are also doing other projects, other work. So, reach out to me, and I would love to talk to, to anyone about sort of any interesting, projects that they are thinking about or want to work on.
How can people contact you? Sorry, go ahead. I was saying, how can people contact you?
Oh, sure. They can, I'll put out my email, I guess.
Do you want to think about it?
I was saying, you can contact me through Facebook. Karelle Hall. Also my Instagram. I'm on. That's Hall,
perfect.
_maybe. Call me maybe. My teenage cousin helped me figure that out. And so we can definitely, have continue to have a conversation.
And if people are interested in donating and support this research, they can contact you there as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, yes. Karelle, I am so happy we had this conversation, and I am so excited to continue it as you move forward in your research, and let me know if I can be of any assistance in any way. And thank you for taking the time to be here with me today and to just be a part of Rise and Thrive.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really wonderful.
Have a great day. Have a great day, everybody. This is Tailinh Agoyo, Rise and Thrive on Usla Media. Check in with us next Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time.